is where the fun begins.
Space Arena.
Grand Arena.
SAGA Podcast.
And welcome back to the Space Arena, Ground Arena, Saga Podcast, where we cover Star Wars Unlimited from the ground up into space. I'm Mr. Ben, and today I'm joined by Banana Crapshoot. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Happy to be here. I'm always excited to talk Star Wars Unlimited. So anytime we get a chance to sit down and spend some quality time together, I always enjoy it. How are you doing?
And I've been playing a lot. I signed up for way too many webcam leagues, and we're going to talk about all that here in a little bit. But man, I have been getting my games, and I've been going to my locals at my store. My kid is into it, so it's like, hey babe, I'm gonna take the kid and we're gonna go hang out, and there's no complaints because it's me and the kid hanging out. You know what I mean? Oh,
Yeah.
it's wonderful. It's been really great.
That's awesome.
How have your locals been treating you?
Good. I've been getting out kind of like every other week because like I have 3 young kids all involved in like sports, right? So like almost every night we have stuff going on. So I get there when I can. That's why I'm happy with how like having the webcam league so we can get some games in with some people. But yeah, I enjoy my locals when I get out there, but just can't always make it. So
Yeah, me and Wit have been not going during the designated like local time up until this week, and we only made it this week because we both had injuries and couldn't go to jujitsu that
Yeah.
night. So I was like, well, if we're not going, that means we get to go to the shop, right?
there you go.
All right, so we'll get more into what we've been playing when we talk about Saga League here in a little bit. But to start the show off, I guess we have to acknowledge, I was dead set, I was certain Set 2 previews were going to come out on May 4th, and I was very wrong. We already have some Set 2 previews to look at.
Exciting stuff.
So we're going to pull those up, and we're going to talk about some new cards right now.
While you're pulling that up, just real quick, Kennedy Hawk will be joining us. Maybe he is currently playing his Saga League webcam match right now. So depending on when that gets done, he might join us. He might not. We'll see how it goes.
Well, hopefully we'll see him, but either way, we're going to dive into this now. This first card, there's not a whole lot to say about either this one or the next one we're going to talk about, other than maybe just commenting on the art. Uh, I guess generally speaking, I like the idea that we're going to get a different token each set, since every set we're going to need tokens,
Yeah.
not recycling the same artwork. And in one of the live streams, they talked about how the artwork is specifically kind of trying to match themes from the set in which the token appears, which I like all of that. That all sounds cool to me.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, other games have done that for different things, right? Like One Piece does it every set. Like the Dawn art is different and stuff. So I can see people really digging using the different, like having a set of all the different experience tokens to use.
Yeah, I can see how eventually my play box
it's
is
cool.
going to be one from each set instead of like a set of matching tokens.
Yep. Yep. 100%.
Right. So from there, I guess we'll dive into looking at some of the actual cards. Uh, we'll start with the Mandalorian's rifle. This is a 3-cost upgrade. It gives +3/+0. You can attach it to a friendly non-vehicle unit, and when played, if it's attached to the Mandalorian, he captures an exhausted enemy non-leader unit. So, what do we know about capture so far?
We know it's a new mechanic in set 2. They talked about it a little bit on the live stream where this card was showed off. So when you capture a card, it, like the reminder text says, it gets placed face down um, under. So like if I play this, I can capture one of your units. So I take your unit and I place it face down under whoever this is attached to, and then it stays there until the capturer leaves play, or maybe some other effect allows you to uncapture a unit or whatever that is called. I think it's a neat mechanic. It's kind of like another version of soft mitigation. Now, instead of just bouncing and exhausting, now we have capturing, and that very much fits with the bounty hunter theme. Um, in set two, and the Mandalorian starting the show as a bounty hunter. You know, I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold is like one of the most iconic lines from that first episode of the Mandalorian, and I visualize that with this card. What do you think?
Um, I don't think you ever play this not on the Mandalorian. At 3 cost plus 3 attack, I mean, maybe if you're in a situation where you're like trying to push for lethal and you feel real sure they don't have the ability to exhaust or disrupt that last attack, maybe you could throw this down just for the +3. But the reason you play this is to beef up your Mandalorian and deal with a problematic unit. If you're not getting that wind plate effect, I don't really see this being worth its 3 cost.
I agree 100%. Yeah, this is definitely a Mandalorian deck. You want this on him
Well,
100%. Otherwise, it's
and
probably
it's
not
worth
worth it.
pointing out that this is special rarity, so this is going to be one of those cards that is not going to be in packs, which I think is cool. I like when card games give us character specific stuff. In the old versus system, we called that legend support, so that's kind of what I refer to this type of card as. It's much worse if you don't have the specific unit that it goes to, like Boba Fett's Fire Spray in set one, for example. And it would be kind of a bummer if this took up a slot in like a sealed environment or a limited environment where you didn't have the Mandalorian to play this. It's like, man, this could be literally anything else. So making it a starter exclusive card, I think, is a good move as well for this kind of like very narrow, specific character support type card piece.
That's a good point. And like we saw that in set one with Luke's saber and Vader's saber, so they're just continuing that concept here. So
All right, moving on. We have yet another card of legend support. Gideon's Light Cruiser. This is an 8 cost villainy affiliated 7/8 with Overwhelm and when played. If you control Moff Gideon as a leader or unit, play a villainy unit that costs 3 or less from your hand or discard pile for free. We've seen an effect very similar to this on a 7 drop in the game already, and that card sees a little bit of play. So, what do you think about this
yep.
1 cost more expensive Darth Vader?
Well, it's not exactly the same as Vader, but in space, I think it's a good space unit. I mean, a 7/8 with Overwhelm in space is pretty good. And when you're playing those expensive cards, your 7, 6, 7, 8 drops, you want them to do something when they enter play. This one gets you another unit. So overall, I think it's pretty cool.
It might also be fair to compare it to Home One. Again, it's not exactly the same, but it's similar. And Home One sees play around my shop. I like that card. So the
Yep.
2 cards I kind of think this is sort of similar to, both of them are in decks. So I anticipate this being in Moff Gideon decks. Outside of a Moff Gideon deck, this is probably way too slow to pay 8 resources for a 7/8 overwhelm that just gets vanquished or whatever after doing nothing.
Yep.
Okay, this one's going to introduce another new mechanic for the set. This is 0 cost cunning upgrade wanted. Attached unit gains bounty. Ready to friendly resources. So you collect the bounty, as the reminder text says here. When this unit is defeated or captured, its opponent collects the bounty. How do you feel about wanted?
I think it's really cool. We had similar effects in Star Wars Destiny where you had bounties. They were called downgrades in Star Wars Destiny, where you would play it on an opponent's unit, and they had different effects. Some of them, if that opponent activated a character, you could gain a resource, or if they were defeated, you get whatever. So you can see them bringing that same sort of flavor into Unlimited with this set, and I like the idea of the bounties. Um, Play them on your opponent's card, defeat it, and you get some sort of payoff for it. And we know this game there's a lot of unit combat and a lot of battle for board control. So I think this card will definitely, I think, see play. Playing this in Boba Fett kind of scares me. Uh, the amount of resources Boba Fett's going to be able to ready um, is pretty wild. So I like it. I like the idea of it. I think it's a cool mechanic. then it fits the IP. So
I definitely like that it's called upgrade and not using the downgrade term from Destiny. I mean, arguably we already have some downgrades in the game. Traitorous, sometimes entrenched, but just let's call them all upgrades and make life easier for all of us. I do want to point out
yep,
this card in Rainbow Unicorn Land. I know this is very unlikely. This is like a huge card combo on turn two, but this card does enable playing Boba Fett leader on turn two. If you ECL your Super Laser DJ into play, and your opponent has something that has sufficient stats that you can crash the Super Laser Tech into it and kill it, you put the bounty on that unit, you ECL the Super Laser DJ into whatever it is that has wanted on it, so it goes into your resource row. This readies two of your resources, so now you have three. You pay for resupply, and you now have five resources on turn two and can deploy your Boba Fett. That's disgusting. That's, I mean, it's not going to happen very often, but oh my goodness, if you're the person that it happens to, like, all
yeah,
right, man, let's just go to game two.
yeah, yeah. That's pretty wild. Double ramp on turn two.
Yeah,
Go
yeah,
to 3 to 5.
disgusting.
Yeah, that's
I
nasty.
mean, your opponent has to play into it a little
It
bit,
could
but
happen.
it's not that hard to have one stat worth of attack in the ground arena on turn two. Like, that's kind of crazy.
I mean, that's like a one. That's like a 3 card combo. So who knows how often it'll happen, but it can happen.
On to our next card. We have Grogu, a two cost cunning, heroism affiliated 0/5 with the action that he can exhaust an enemy unit. Uh, that effect, if first of all, 5 defense is likely to survive long enough to get to use it at least once. That effect, it doesn't seem like a lot, but I've played enough Thrawn. I promise you, being able to exhaust a unit when your opponent wants to do something with it, this can hose so many plays. This can just ruin some. You exhaust their turn one recruit, and now all of a sudden their fleet commander is Garbaggio as a turn two play instead of being this like devastating swing to your face. So I don't know.
Hmm.
What do you think about Grogo?
I think he's interesting. The zero power, right? It's like, why would I want to play this? But he's he's he almost should say Sentinel because your opponent's gonna want to take him out because they don't want you to sit there and just put their dudes to sleep every turn. And it's just an enemy unit. That's it. So it could be leaders. Doesn't matter the cost. Doesn't matter the power. It's not restricted to anything other than it has to be an enemy unit. So he can put a lot of things on ice. So I mean, I think we'll see play because that's a pretty strong effect. Um, being able to put anything your opponent plays on ice is pretty strong. So um,
Yeah, it's really annoying.
yeah, maybe not as strong as like Iceman, right? From versus
I would
system,
actually
but
compare this to an old
um,
versus system
kind
card.
of similar.
There was a Doom affiliated guy named Puppet Master who had basically this exact same card identity. No attack, a big butt, a low cost, and you just
Mm.
exhaust the guy to exhaust something. And that card saw a ton of play in old versus. So
It's the same card.
yes, this is going to be a lightning rod. People are going to try to kill this, but if I play this on turn one, exhaust whatever you're and like get a sentinel down in front of it and start exhausting your guys and force you to like chop through things. I suppose we'll talk about this concept when we get to Saga League, given that you've been playing that Chewy deck, but it doesn't take much to overrun your opponent's ability to clear things, and
Yep.
this helps you prevent them from being able to clear things. So this seems like it could potentially be a very nasty card.
Yeah. Give him a Jedi lightsaber, and then he's a 3/8. You know, if you give him an electro staff, then he's a 2/7, and whatever attacks into him gets -1 power. Right. So it's like you really want to do this right with Grogu. So um, yeah, I think he's good.
Here is the card that will immediately take the place of Cell Block Guard in a whole bunch of command decks. A 3 cost command villainy affiliated 3/3 with
Hmm.
Sentinel, Phase 3 Dark Trooper. When combat damage is dealt to this unit, give an experience token to this unit if it survives the damage. So it's a cell block guard that can grow. Cell block guard sees play. This guy's going to see play if you're in these colors for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think of like Tarkin right away, because Tarkin can already give experience tokens to Imperial units. So if you play him on 3 and then Tarkin gives him an experience token, now he's a 4/4 Sentinel. That's gonna just keep growing from there. I think the 3/3 is a little easier to get one hit, but if you make him a 4/4, that might take 2 hits at that stage of the game. So I definitely think we'll see play, and I like this artwork a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're on villainy and in green, this is a strict upgrade over cell block guard. It plays the same role, but it has
Mm-hmm.
upside potential.
Yep.
All right, the Mandalorian. 6 cost. Vigilance and Heroism affiliated. 5/6 Sentinel. When played, you may heal all damage from a unit that costs 2 or less and give 2 shield tokens to it. Do you think there was a card they had in mind for this guy when they put that win played ability on him?
I think it's probably the Guardian of the Wills
There
is
you
the one
go.
I'm thinking. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely Grogu. Uh, it's designed to work with Grogu. He can protect him with Sentinel, shields him up, heals him, and it fits. I mean, that's what he does. He's protecting his little dude. So I think it's pretty solid. I mean, you think like Obi-Wan is a 6 cost in the same aspect combination, and he's what, a 4/7 or a 4/6. So like he's right there stat wise, and then his payoff is a little different. But if you have Grogu out and you play the Mandalorian, like Grogu's not going anywhere, and then you're just sitting there turning dudes sideways all the rest of the game. And at that stage of the game, they're trying to end it probably, or they're trying to turn the corner. So then they are playing their bombs, and then you're just saying nope, nope, or not letting them finish the game because now you got this 5/6 dude that can just hit your base
There are
because
going to be
anything
some
you play is
percentage
getting
of
turned
games
sideways.
where you just have to play this
What do
guy
you
on
think?
6, even though you don't have the 2 costs to give the shields to. And it's probably okay. I mean, it's not plan A, it's a little bit of a desperation
Mm-hmm.
play, but you're not horribly punished for it. Like, it does kind of feel like an Obi-Wan, but with like no back end payoff. So you have to set up the payoff before you play this guy. He's fine. He's fine.
He's a legendary, also the first legendary unit we saw.
Yeah. For a legendary, I'm a little less excited. I He does not get me as amped up as some other legendaries have, but he's fine. All right, so let's talk about the Mandalorian ship, the Razor Crest. This is a 4 cost Vigilance, Heroism affiliated 3/4 space vehicle. Restore 2, and when played, you may return an upgrade from your discard pile to your hand. Uh, it feels like this is a card that's kind of designed to go in the starter deck, that it is an exclusive card too. Like, clearly the bounties, the Mandalorian rifle that we started talking about, these are the kind of cards that this thing is going to throw back into your hand. Potentially this could have some legs in the wider meta as just a way to recycle a particularly useful upgrade. Like, if we get a really important bounty that people want to play more than 3 times per game, or that they need it enough to have this recursion so they can get that first one back, I could see this having some fringe play as like a tech card. Um, Generally speaking, though, like, so you play a unit, you play an upgrade on it, it dies, then you play this to get the upgrade back, then you have to play another unit to play that upgrade. It does seem like it might be a little slow, a little janky, outside of like a specific application where there's a certain upgrade that you want, or potentially in a theme deck, which is what I assume the starter decks are going to be. What are your thoughts on the Razor Crest?
I think the when played is just a bonus I don't really care about. I like the 3/4 with restore 2 on a space unit. Um, you're thinking about like the Chewy deck I've been playing, right? Like having the space unit that we're playing, the Arc 170 is cheap, it dies easy, but it has restore 1 and it can do a lot of work in space. And this thing is beefier, has the same stats as the System Patrol Craft with Sentinel, um, but allows you to heal when you swing with it. So I like what this does as far as the restore 2 in space on a 4-cost unit. Um, Imperial Interceptor, when it comes into play, is going to take this out. So I like I like it. I think the when played is just a bonus. There's some stuff with like if you're doing like a cheer at deck where you are playing Guardian of the Wills and it gets knocked out, that you can bounce your Jedi lightsaber back to your hand, and then the next turn you can deploy Cheered and play the Jedi lightsaber. You just bounce back on a Cheered or something. So I think there's cases for the when played. Um, Definitely with bounties, we got to see how many bounties we get. But if you can play a bounty, get the payoff, and then get the bounty back to keep cycling the bounties, that might be good. We got to see what the rest of those bounties do. But overall, I think it's a solid space unit. I mean, just a 3/4 with restore 2 in space. I like.
All right. My favorite kind of cards, removal. This is a 4-cost vigilance, villainy, affiliated event, calculated lethality. Defeat a non-leader unit that costs 3 or less. For each upgrade that was on that unit, give an experience token to a friendly unit. Uh, I don't know, man. I think if bounties are as powerful as like if bounties are good and we actually see a lot of units with upgrades, I just don't see enough upgrades for this to be like, how is this better than takedown as a 4-cost removal? As much as I want to be excited for a cool new removal option, I don't know if this one does it for me.
I mean, take down 4 cost. You hit something 5 or less remaining health. This one, it doesn't matter what the health is. It just hits anything that costs 3 or less. So
Can't
I
hit a
think it's a
leader.
different type of removal, right? It can't hit a leader, but anything that costs 3, it can hit. So I don't know if that's better than takedown or worse. It's probably worse, but it does have an upside in certain decks. I don't know if this is going to be a staple removal. It might be sideboard removal, but it is cool to see where they go with removal after set 1.
So certain kinds of
So now
matchups or
instead of
metas, I could see this being really good. Like if I know I'm gonna go fight Tarkin, or maybe like a Leia that's running wing leaders or something, like I know my opponent is gonna be putting enough
Mhm.
upgrades out that I can get value plus off of this. I could see that happening, but I have a hard time including cards in my deck that require my opponent to play along to get the value, and that's why I kind of fall back to like, well, maybe we get that upgrade
Mhm.
value out of playing the bounties on it ourselves. Maybe it's possible pay 4, kill a 3 or less unit is just good enough. I've certainly played Power of the Dark Side to remove 2-cost units, so sometimes paying more for removal than the cost of the unit is the correct play. Um, and I might be focusing too much on the potential upside and ignoring where the value actually is hidden on this card. But I don't know. In Villainy Vigilance, I feel like there's already a lot of really good removal options, and this one just, unless the meta doesn't line up to get that value add, I feel like it might not perform as well as some of the ones we already have. I love the art though. I think that looks cool.
Mhm.
All right, the Mandalorian. So this
Yeah,
is
that's
the
fair.
leader unit. In fact, let's start with the undeployed side. So on undeployed, the
Yeah.
Mandalorian, when you play an upgrade, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, exhaust an enemy unit with 4 or less remaining HP. How do you feel about that undeployed leader power?
I think it's neat. Can trigger off bounties. You can trigger off your own upgrades that you're playing on your own dudes. Um, I don't think this is something you're gonna want to try to build to happen every turn, because then, like, what's your deck look like? Deck it's really interesting to see how deck building is gonna go with the Mandalorian, how many upgrades you include. But I mean, being able to exhaust something with 4 or less HP seems pretty cool because it's not limited to non-leader. So you could potentially hit a leader after you've swung into it once, and then you can exhaust something. So I think he's cool. Or he can just straight up exhaust Iden because she's only a 4/4. So um, I think it's cool. I like exhaust effects. So
Yeah,
um, I think
it's
it's cool.
a little
What are
wonky
your
to get
thoughts
there.
on it?
I think you probably want to build a deck that has upgrade payoff in and of itself. Like your suggested line of Grogu into like Jedi lightsaber, exhausting whatever they're like. You exhaust Grogu, exhaust something that, and trying to lock the board down. It does have sort of an expiration date though. At a certain point, four or less is probably not going to be sufficient to make like big impactful plays because people are going to be playing units with bigger. But early game, that seems pretty strong. Once we get to 6 resources, he's going to flip, and we're going to have a 4/7 that when you play an upgrade, you can exhaust an enemy unit with 6 or less remaining HP. So his deployed side kind of addresses the weak point in his undeployed side, at least for a turn or two before he gets taken out. How do you feel about deploying on 6 for a 4/7 with this ability? What do you think of this leader?
I think he has the deploy and the stats that Boba Fett probably should have. Boba Fett's a 4/7 that deploys on 5 and can ready resources for you. So I think that's an outlier. This is probably like where a 6 deploy leader should be in that 4/7 range. So I think he's fairly statted for when he deploys, and his ability is better. It's interesting that you don't have to like exhaust on his. It's not an action; it just happens. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like Boba Fett on Boba Fett's front side, where when you defeat a unit, you can just exhaust them to ready a resource, and then this is kind of like the same thing where it doesn't take an action to do it; it just happens. So I think it's a little interesting. I don't know if that's like a Mandalorian sub theme type thing or what, but his unit side I think is solid. And obviously the ability is better because it can hit a more wide range of things.
It is going to be a little dependent on quality of upgrades, both positive ones that you play on your side of the board, or bounties or crummy upgrades on the other side of the board. But I'm already playing some upgrades, and it seems like this is going to be a set that's going to give us a lot more exciting ones to play. So I'm optimistic that we're going to have the tools to make this guy playable. And at that point, man, I already like playing a leader that exhausts everybody all over the place. You know what I mean? Okay, so our last couple cards here today, we have Moff Gideon, command affiliated,
Mm-hmm.
villainy affiliated.
Yeah.
He has the action attack with a unit that costs 3 or less. If it's attacking a unit, it gets +1 attack for this attack. How do you feel about this leader power on the undeployed side?
Eh, that's how I feel about it.
I agree.
That's what I got. I don't really know what else to say other than it's there.
It starts to get a lot worse the later you get into the game. At a certain point, you don't want to be attacking units anymore. You want to be attacking base. This doesn't do anything for you in that department. I guess it helps you control the board a little bit with low cost units. But let's see what happens at 5 when you get to deploy this guy. He comes out as a 3/6 with Overwhelm, a 3/6 with Overwhelm, and each friendly unit that costs 3 or less gets +1 attack and gains Overwhelm while attacking an enemy unit. Uh, I think it's kind of obvious that what he wants to do is play a lot. He wants to play a wide board of low cost units, probably some of them with Sentinel so that he can stick around for more than a turn, and then swing those snowtroopers, those cell block guards, the phase 3, just all these troopers into people to try to get that snowball effect of playing a really wide board. I have a feeling
Mm-hmm.
he's going to be susceptible to kind of the same thing that go wide swarm decks are often susceptible to in card games, and that is any kind of like board wipe removal. If I can play an event that deals with 2 or 3 of your units, what do you have left after that? This play pattern is fine. I'm happy for it to exist in the game, but it seems very easily disruptible. Not knowing the full extent of what he's going to have supporting him, just based on this guy and the card pool we already have, this seems a little sketchy to me. What do you think about Moff Gideon?
I think he's okay. I'm curious why his frontside ability, when you can attack with the unit and it gets +1, why doesn't that also give it overwhelm? Then that frontside ability would be a lot better in my opinion. I wonder if it originally did give overwhelm and they found some broken combo and they're like, no, we can't do that. We got to get rid of the overwhelm. Um, but like if that's an attack with a unit cost 3 or less, if it's attacking a unit, it gets +1 power and overwhelm for this attack. Like I feel like that would be better, but maybe they found that was just too strong. I don't know. So I think his deployed side is fine. It's better than his undeployed side, in my opinion. Um, but yeah, I agree. Your dudes that cost 3 or less, I don't know that he will be competitively viable, but he's okay.
Yeah, seems clunky to me. I'm not excited about either side of this card at this point. Now it could be we're gonna get a whole bunch of like cool low cost stormtroopers and Imperials that are gonna make this guy look really really good, but I'm pretty lukewarm on this guy.
I don't even know if I'm lukewarm. I'm more like Tauntaun warm, you know?
Yeah, Luke in a tauntaun warm.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so that's all the cards we have for set two, which was a pretty decent number for them to just kind of dump on us. Surprised me.
Yep. And then it was pretty cool. We got to learn about the capture and the bounty mechanic. There is a third new mechanic coming into the set called Smuggle. They haven't said what that does yet, but look out for it.
Okay, so let's move on and I guess talk about what we've been playing, which normally happens at the top of the deck. So, or at the top of the show. So what have you been playing, Banana?
Been playing a few decks. Most recently, been playing the Mono Blue Chewbacca deck. Uh, that Dan inspired me. Dan built it, did a deck tech video on it, or deck build video, or strategy video. Which his strategy video is the first one he put out for Vader. It was like an hour and 15 minutes long. And one of my locals was like, "Dude, that's an hour and 15 minutes for like a deck guide." And I'm like, "No, it's like 30 minutes, and then the rest is gameplay." But I think he was like, "Dude, that's like that's long." And I was like, "Yeah, well." So the Chewy one's similar. I think my deck is pretty. I think my sideboard is a little different than his, but the Chewy deck is fun. Played it against Mono Green Hera, which ramped really fast. In the first game, I got to like 24 out of 25 health, like 2 or 3 rounds in a row, and I was able to heal it back with like vigilance and redemption. So I was able to take that matchup. And then last week I played against Boba Green, with the whole ECL and your typical Boba Green. And I had Chewbacca up to like 16 damage. Like he could deal 16 damage to base with like the upgrades. Like he had a Jedi lightsaber and like 2 experience tokens and a shield from the forces with me. So he was a wall king carpet for sure. But yeah, that Chewy deck's a lot of fun. I definitely encourage people. I know the green Chewy's been getting some love, but Mono Blue is pretty good. Bendu is a problem. You give Bendu a Jedi lightsaber, and he is a 7/10 that can wreck pretty much anything. And then the Bendu attack, you get his own attack ability, where the next non-heroic or non-villainous card you play costs 2 less, then you can play Vigilance for 2. And healing 5 and defeating a unit, or healing 5 and milling 6 for 2 is pretty strong, it turns out. On the side, I've been messing with other decks, like we talk in Discord, different deck builds and stuff. So, but mainly the Saga League stuff, the Chewy deck. It's a lot of fun. I encourage people to try it. Check out Dan's deck guide video with some gameplay, and then I have 2 gameplay videos up from the most recent matches. And I'm pretty sure I know what you've been playing, but let's hear about
So
all the webcam leagues
I
you're in and what you're playing.
I did start off Saga League with the idea that I was gonna play like just fun chill decks, and that lasted one game. And then I was like, okay, I don't want to be on Han Solo when other people are on Boba Fett. I'm gonna play for real. So I brought Thrawn out. And it did take me a little while before I landed on the version of Thrawn that I'm on now, which runs very few units. It relies heavily on events and entrench to kind of stay alive. And since I've landed on this list, I've played 2 weeks of Saga League. Uh, I played one of my matches in the Infinite Gaming Webcam League, and I've played 2 weeks of this card store in South Carolina that I somehow got connected with that's doing a Star Wars Discord league. So I've played 5 matches on this version of Thrawn, and I am currently 10-1 in my games. So 4 of the 5 matches I won 2-0. The only game that I dropped was against Leia, which I think the Leia matchup is not favored for me. Like Leia, Sabine, even Tarkin to some degree are hard matchups for Thrawn. But I fought a Tarkin, I fought a Leia in these. I don't know how serious or experienced necessarily all the opponents are in the various leagues that I'm playing, and I'm not trying to like necessarily take a victory lap on anybody. Respect to all opponents, but I feel very good that my predictions about Thrawn having game in the meta, I have certainly been able to prove that there is some truth to that at least.
10-1 in 5 matches with Thrawn. That's pretty good. And you played. Have you played any other control decks? Like, have you done the control mirror game? Like, that had to be
Those are my best matchups. So two of those five were
okay.
Krennics, and that is a matchup I feel very, very confident about because Krennic is all about wanting to like fight on the board and have better math than you because of his grit power and all that. And I don't play that game at all. I don't even mess with the board. I don't even like field units into Krennic until like turn 8 or 9 after I've super lasered Krennic off the board, all those early little units that they develop. Uh, so yeah, the control matchups I feel really, really good about. Mid range, I feel comfortable, but like Boba's a tough deck to beat. Uh,
Yeah.
it's really the Sabine, the Leias, the decks that want to go wide and run me over in the early turns. Those are the decks that are scary, but I haven't seen much of that so far. My matchups have been two Krennics, a Tarkin, a Chirrut, and a Leia. And that turret was dicey because it came out, it was a turret red that came out really aggressive with like the Sabine package of like the Fighters for Freedom, the Green Squadron A Wings, the Fleet Lieutenants and Wing, all this like early aggro stuff. And then like mid game, it switches into like Yoda, Kanan, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and all of a sudden it's tanky. And that is hard for my removals to deal with. But I mean, we got there
Yeah,
twice,
I
so.
think as someone that's been playing a lot of Chariot Red, like I did a deck guide article on Chariot Red. I called it Cheerios or whatever. Um, yeah, I'm running the Green Squadron A Wing, Wing Leader, Fleet Lieutenant, like early game. But then yeah, it's like and you never use Chariot's front side. But what Chariot is best at is he allows you to hit a force unit on curve every round. So your force throws are always online. The forces with me is always online. Your Jedi lightsabers you can always get extra payoff for. So I think Chirrut, the best thing about Chirrut is that he deploys on 5 resources. Because there's not a force unit that does that. So you have it in Chirrut. Now he's susceptible to takedown because he only has 5 health. But when you get Chirrut out, if you can give him an electro staff or a Jedi lightsaber, now he becomes a problem. If you're running like the Obi-Wans and the Luke package as your late game and redemption, like there's a lot of you swing fast and hard early, and then it switches to more of a cheer the beat stick with this other stuff you have to deal with. So I can see how that would be a little dicey for Thrawn because he doesn't have great for removal for leader cheer it. Other than it, like if you miss takedown on him, I could see that being a problem. I think you probably mulligan for takedown against cheer it and just hold on to it. And as soon as he deploys, bam.
Front side can be pretty annoying too because the +2 health can take takedown and Count Dooku offline even late game. Like it can be hard for my removals to line up if my opponent knows some of my removals have that kind of like HP check. It's like, oh, I'm gonna beef this guy up. Like, oh, what do I do here now?
Right. What else? How have your since you're playing in 3 different webcam leagues currently? Are they all run similarly? Like, what? How's your experience with the
So they're all
different
different.
leagues?
So Saga League, we get the pairings get posted, and we have a whole week. So there's all those weekdays, and then those precious weekend days where everybody's schedules are more open, and navigating around time zones aren't as difficult. Then there's the Infinite Gaming, and this is the server that used to be called Dice Throne Competitive Online. These guys have been kind of the core of the competitive webcam space for that game for quite a while now, and they both got bit by the swoo bug. So now they've rebranded to not be Dice Throne specific, which that's a path I'm kind of familiar with. Uh, and that one uses group stages. So you're assigned a group, you have your 7 or 8 people, whatever it is, and you have like 2 months to play all your games. And it's not a weekly thing. It's you have this big stretch of time and you just have to contact all your people, get all your games played and reported by the end, which inevitably ends up to 7 weeks of inactivity and then 7 games in 1 week right at the end. And then the last one, this
Yeah.
Cards R Us Discord server that I somehow stumbled into, that one gives you 5 days to schedule, and that's rough. Like they posted pairings late Sunday night, and games have to be turned in by like Friday at some point. And my opponent in this round was Pacific time, and he's like, "Yeah, man, I get off work at like 10 o'clock my time," which I know, for somebody in your 20s that doesn't sound that late. I'm an old
Yeah.
man. I go to bed at 10 o'clock most of the time. So that has been a little difficult to not only balance scheduling multiple leagues worth of games, but to line up the schedules on such a tight timetable. But hey, each way of doing it, I think, has its advantages and disadvantages. And I don't want to throw shade at the way anybody's running their thing. Group stages are great because it gives you a lot of flexibility. But again, you end up with like a glut of games at the end and a lot of inactivity at the front. I personally really like what Saga League is doing with 1 week per match, making sure you get those weekend days. The pressure of having 5 days and no weekends to line up has been a little difficult, but it also makes the events get over a lot quicker and sort of fit in a calendar month. So across all of them, I really have nothing but praise. Other than criticism, maybe for myself choosing to sign up for so many, that might be overkill.
Yeah. Is there a fourth on the horizon? Is there another uh that you're gonna
Uh,
is
well, I am also playing in a Radlands League right now, but
okay. Uh Radlands on webcam. How's that work? That's gotta be
so
because it's a shared deck. So how's
yeah.
that work?
So this is a total aside from Star Wars Unlimited. But yes, Radlands, when you play it face to face, there's one draw deck that both opponents draw from. And when we started doing webcam, I was really concerned that if I have my deck and you just use your deck, that it would like throw off the balance of the game. I even got in contact with the game designer and I was like, hey, what do you think about this? And his response was like, dude, don't even worry about it. Just do it. So we've done multiple seasons of this now, and it just isn't a big deal. Yes, there are more copies of each card that you could run into. Uh, but fundamentally, you still know exactly what's in the other person's draw deck. You know exactly what's in yours. So there are some board states that couldn't exist in a face-to-face game of Radlands with one deck, but the two decks, it really doesn't throw it
Hmm.
off, and it facilitates play really easily. Uh, if you are a fan of Star Wars Unlimited and 1v1 card games in general, I strongly recommend checking out Radlands. It's a one box game that is just maybe the tightest, like best balanced 1v1 card dueling game I've ever
Hmm.
played. It's maybe a game I might go so far as to call it almost a perfect card game. I really, really
That's
like
very
it.
good. I'll also endorse it. And the last thing we'll say about Radlands before we get back on Star Wars Unlimited is that punks are people too. So, um,
Sure.
yeah. So 3 webcam leagues going to locals. Is your son uh playing any webcam games, or is he
No,
strictly going to the store with dad?
yeah, he enjoys playing, but during lockdown, he got into webcam stuff for a while, and it didn't click with him. He does not enjoy sitting like in the closed room. Like it gets hot with the computer going, and he prefers the face-to-face experience. Um, so he hasn't been doing any webcam, but man, seeing him go to the store and just walk up to strangers and be like, "Hey, do you guys want to play?" And then he puts Boba Fett on the table, and the stranger goes, "Oh." But it's really cool. I think we all, can feel shy in certain situations. Uh, and my kid feeling comfortable enough at the store to just like walk up to people that he doesn't know and be like, "Hey, you want to get a game?" That's a cool moment. On top of, the shared experience of like my favorite thing in the world, sharing it with my kid. Like it just doesn't get much better than
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that's very cool. Very cool. Um, should we move on to the next thing then?
That works for me. Oh,
Sideboarding.
yes.
How to tips, tricks, strategies, good plays, good ideas, things to think about. Well, I was gonna say I don't know if you just like what is your what is your personal sideboarding strategy? Like I know you're not a fan of sideboards, right? We went through that months ago. It was kind of like me against you and Dan on that on that one. Uh, but like, what is your strategy for sideboardings when you're building, like initially building your deck, and you're
So
initially getting into your
I don't
sideboarding
think it should be
process?
part of the initial deck build at all. In my opinion, sideboarding is the way you adjust whatever your core plan is to deal with specific threats. So, in the same way that I talk about how you should build your deck first and then add tech cards later, I think sideboarding is like the ultimate tech card. It's like a package of tech cards. So, I would want to figure out what my deck wants to do first, figure out what my plan is first, figure out what my initial 50 cards is, and get that dialed in pretty quick. Maybe not quickly, but before I even start looking at sideboard options, because I think of the sideboard as a way to deal with problems that come up in specific matches, and I'm incapable of knowing what those specific problems are or in what matches they might arise if I haven't put the reps in with the initial 50. So that's my approach. Um, how do you feel about sideboarding?
I like it.
Or I'm sorry, let me
It's
rephrase that. What
similar.
is your approach?
I agree. You don't build your deck and sideboard at the same time. You build your 50, you play with that, you run with that, you figure out what you're good into, what you're bad into, and then your sideboard is a way to make those bad matchups better and those good matchups even better, right? So I think we kind of have the same thought process there. Um, so like your Thrawn deck, a lot of removal, not a lot of units. You figured out, hey, I'm weak against this aggro matchup, Sabine and Leia. So I'm guessing your sideboard. Uh, how do you identify the cards to put in your sideboard? And when you
Well,
build your sideboard, do you start with like 20 cards and whittle it down to 10, or do you just go with 10 and then adjust from there?
I'm very much a subtractive deck builder, so I will always lay out 20 cards and then whittle them down. Or more realistically, I'll lay out 80 cards and whittle it down to my 50. And then out of those remnants tends to be where the sideboard grows. But just here's one specific example of something that's been happening with my Thrawn deck. As I've been trying to figure out ways to shore up my worst matchups. So there was when I initially started building it, I didn't care about fixing my worst matchups. I was just trying to make my deck do. I wanted to never win a control or never lose a control situation. Like if the game goes to turn 10, I want to win 100% of the time. That's kind of my. I know that's unrealistic. You're never going to win 100% of that, but that's kind of my headspace. Is what the deck has to do. Plan A is survive to the late turns, and then I take over. So initially, my whole sideboard was packed with extra control tools and ways to make my deck better at doing the thing that it already did pretty well. And I eventually realized I don't need 10 cards to maximize my gameplay. I only needed 3. So as far as like the control matchups in my sideboard of 10 cards, 3 of them specifically address direct problems that could cost me the game in a control matchup. The other 7 are all cards that are going to come in and replace clunky top end stuff. Search Your Feelings has got to go in the aggro matchup. I'll never survive long enough to play that. And I do bring some more units in. And one thing that happened specifically after playing last night at locals is I realized I had Death Troopers and Greedos in my sideboard to shore up the aggro matchup, which is good. Both those cards can put 5 damage out there into the field. They can fight to control the ground arena. And where I was having problems was in the space arena with those Green Squadron A-Wings that everybody's playing. And it didn't take that much thought to go, I'm doubling down in my sideboard on an arena
Mm-hmm.
that might be totally useless. I need something that can deal 3 damage in the space arena. And of course, 7th Fleet Defender fits that role excellently. So the Greedos are out, the 7th Fleet Defenders are in, and that's a unit because of the shield that could potentially kill 2 Green Squadron A-Wings. And that's sort of just an organic transition that happened with the sideboard as I've been playing with it and kind of learning. So while I think the main 50 is pretty well settled, the sideboard is still kind of in flux as I'm working this stuff out. And I anticipate it will be in flux. Like if I go to an event, it'll be in flux like right up until I walk into the event. And then when I go to the event after that one, it'll again adjust. Because to some degree, your sideboard has to be more meta responsive than your deck. I mean, the deck also should be built thinking about the meta, but the sideboard is like that fine tuning. Like if the deck itself is like your your strategy, the sideboard is like tactics. It's like very more specific tuning. A little bit of a fumbled metaphor there, my bad.
Yeah, it's good. Are there any cards that you feel in this game at the moment, in a certain aspect, should always be in a sideboard if they're not in your main deck? Like for me, I think of Force Surrender, the one that says like, "Hey, draw two cards, and each opponent you've dealt damage to this game or this phase, like they discard two cards." I feel like that should always be side decked into your main deck against control if you're not playing control. If you are playing control, I don't know what you do. But I feel like if you're playing aggression, you should have Force Surrender in your sideboard to play against control, because when they're holding on to, like, if you're playing Thrawn and you're holding on to your late game pieces and I whack you and then play Force Surrender and now you have to discard two cards, like I just deleted your bombs, right? I feel like that could be a blowout into control decks. Testing and playing Boba Yellow to get ready for the 1K. I was between like Change of Heart and I had no choice, and ultimately I went with I had no choice because even though it was more of a side deck decision, I put it main board because it helped me. I felt it was better in a control decks, which is I was expecting a lot of control decks at that tournament, just based on the people that play at the store and the decks they were playing. So I kind of swapped. I was deciding which one I wanted to main board and sideboard, but for that tournament, I felt like I was going to see more control decks, so I went with I had no choice because I can remove 2 units late game from the board. So, um,
I have a hard time
yeah,
coming up with a card that I would want in every deck. Um, Maybe something like No Good to Me Dead would sort of fit that role. If you're on Cunning and Villainy, that's just a really good card. I get that it doesn't solve problems, it just stalls them, but sometimes stalling a leader from attacking for 2 turns is all you need to turn the corner. I mean, like against a Han deck, if somebody no good to me is your Han, you're done. Like that's
hmm
GG most of the time. Um, but even there, I can envision cunning villainy decks that probably wouldn't want that card, that they would deal with those problems with different in a different way. So it's a little hard. I mean, I can definitely name standout cards in certain aspects, but like if you're in command villainy, you're not sideboarding your super laser tech. That's a main deck card. You know what I mean? Maybe Rook, but every deck, Ruck is a great way to deal with big fatty units, and having it in the main deck, it can be a little clunky, um, especially if you're running Energy Conversion Lab, Steadfast Battalion, coming down as a 7/7, ambushing with Overwhelm into something feels a little better, generally speaking, than Ruck. But in certain matchups, that card's really, really good. So if you're on Green Villainy, maybe that's a card that you have in the sideboard for that type of matchup. I could maybe see that.
I was just curious because like Force Surrender is one that to me, if it doesn't fit in the main deck and I'm in red, it's like this is probably gonna be one of the first cards I add to my sideboard after I get some games, and just because I know how it can be into control decks. Um, So it kind of sounds like we have the same approach. We build our 50, we play against all kinds of stuff, and then we figure out what we're strong and weak against, and then we start looking at cards to make those matchups better to add to our decks. That seemed fair.
Yeah, and I think that's got to be the way. I can't. Well, of course, I can't comprehend doing it a different way because I do it the way that I do it. But I have, as a deck builder, again, because I build in a subtractive way. I lay out a ton of cards and then I whittle down to my deck. I have fallen into that trap of sort of looping around like, well, if I play this, then I have to play this because if my opponent plays that, then that'll counter this. So I have to play this. And I end up with a deck that's like all tech cards and no meat, like no substance. Uh, and
Right.
if I'm not like disciplined and regimented about solve your deck's issue first, I've definitely gone into tournaments before with just like a utility belt full of like good answers that but not asking any questions of my own. And I feel like once I learned that, hey, you've got to figure out how to present threats of your own, you've got to do your deck things first. My deck building and my success rate went way, way up. So that's advice I would give to everyone else. If somebody else has a way of like starting from the sideboard or working that backwards, I would be really interested to hear what their method is because that's hard for me to even wrap my head around.
Yeah, I don't see how you could start sideboard first. That just seems
Unless you know exactly what the meta is going to be in advance. And it's like, hey, I know I have to have this silver bullet because this matchup's going to show up for sure. That's locked in. So, yeah, okay. I guess it's not that hard to imagine a scenario. But even then, that's not building your deck. That's just one specific tool that you need. That's not quite the same thing.
I want to go back in time a little bit to when we were talking about sideboarding initially on this podcast. Um, and we were given reasons why we liked or disliked sideboarding, right? And it's like, have you found that sideboarding has made the gameplay experience better, worse, or not at all? Like, have you found that okay, game one's over, we go to game two, and now I have no chance because my opponent just silver bowled me into oblivion? Or
Uh,
do you still feel like
so here's
you can do
again,
what you need to do?
I'll tap into my recent experience. So here's what happens to me. I play Thrawn. Game one takes an hour. My opponent doesn't really realize what I'm doing until the end. And then when they die from fatigue damage, they're like, I'm not going to let that happen again. And they pick up their whole sideboard of 10 cards and throw it into their main deck. And now I have to fight them with 60 cards. This has happened a couple of times. And what I've learned is I have to have restock in my sideboard so I can play Vigilance twice, then restock it along with maybe a Super Laser and an Avenger, and that's what allows me to overcome those extra 10 cards because I am very much trying to stall you out. I know it's toxic. It's a horribly unfun way to play, but it's what I'm doing. Um, so I'm not thrilled with how I have to put like a really bad card, like restock. I have to play restock. Come on, man. I'm not thrilled that I have to play that card to answer and it's correct. I mean, I'm poking fun a little bit, but obviously, if you know your opponent is trying to win by decking you out, you play more than 50 cards. Like that's the correct play. Like I'm not legitimately criticizing anybody for making that play, but it does mean I have to play restock in order to deal with that. So I could, if I'm being charitable, make the argument that reacting to that sideboard meta is just another layer of skill testing. Uh, and the more places where we have skill testing, the more skillful the game. Like we're all here because the puzzles that the game makes us solve are hard. They test our skill. That's the value in playing these games. That's what I love about them so much. So I can play that side of the field if I want to. I get it. I would prefer, though, a world where we just show up with our 50 cards and your 50 has to beat my 50 best two out of three. I like that a little bit better, but I'm not I'm not gonna like sword fight anybody over it or anything. You know what I mean?
I think it's kind of amazing that you have to have restock in your sideboard to be like that's like think about it, like restock, right? They made that card, and here is a meta relevant example of where that card fits, and it shouldn't fit, but it does. So I think that's amazing game design by FFG that they pulled that off.
I mean, they made me play it.
You're 10-1 with
I
restock.
mean, there are some
So
games where like if it's game one and I haven't put the restock in yet, there's some games where I have to not search my feelings because of the way the deck count is. I have to make sure I don't deck out first. Because sometimes you have to use vigilance to kill a unit just to not die, and then you can't mill six. And I'm not putting restock in the main deck because that card is ridiculous. Uh, so there are some games where I have to be really careful about monitoring my deck level because I had a game at locals last night where I had decked him out like two turns. He was gonna die next turn, and then like I ran out of cards, and we were both taking the damage. So there's a lot of weird things
I
that can
made it.
happen when you make every game last an hour.
yeah, I bet.
I
Jeez.
just finished it,
Um,
and it was epic. So I couldn't decide what deck to run, so I asked you to, and Mr. Ben told me to play Han. So that was my randomizer. That was my D4, because I have four decks over here, and I couldn't decide. And I was nervous about it, because I made this deck, like, over the last 2 days, and I haven't really played it against, you know, real Gex, and but I was like, it's a pretty fun deck, and it's Han red, and it's 18 space units, 18 ground units, and 14 events. But the goal is to actually focus all on space, and all of my ground units are just like delaying my opponent. It's Leia to exhaust their units. It's Lothal for after I waylay things to make them discard the thing I wanted to get rid of. Open fires, K2SOs, things that are going to force them to attack into me to get rid of my threats. So I was waiting for my opponent, and it was JV Swashbuckler from the Saga Discord. And he turns his camera on at the same time I turned mine on, and he's also playing Han Red. So we had a Han Red mirror match. He had Tarkin Town, which was interesting. It actually worked out really well for him. I have like a lot of vehicles, and then I have the ATRTs that have assault, or ambush, so that they can come in and take care of threats and like act like removal events that are also ground bodies. But when they get damaged, then they get taken out by Tarkin Town. So I took game one. We raced to 25 really fast. Started with an A-Wing, went to Red 3, went to 2 more spaceships, and things just snowballed. And then in game 2, I was going second in both those games. It was pretty even. We each had like 5 or 6 points of damage on our base. My opponent was playing in space that time. They got A-Wings and stuff down, so I had to slow a little bit to deal with that. And we had a turning point where I was definitely going to win, and then didn't. Where my opponent had 3 cards left in hand and 2 open resources, and I had like 4 cards in hand because I had played some card draw and things like that. And it was the turn where we were both going to use Han to tap or exhaust and play a resource from our hand. So my opponent does it, and then I do it, and I hit his base for 2 with Leia or something like that. And this deck has one other trick in it, and it's Forced Surrender, a card that I didn't think was going to be great, but is amazing in Han. So I hit my opponent's base and said, this is great. I think he had 3 cards left because he had bounced Falcon or something like that. And he had 2 open resources, so he tapped 2, or exhausted 2, and he said, I'm going to play a card. And I was like, oh, this is even better. He's going to be down to 0 cards. I'm so excited. And he played Spark of Rebellion. And I was like, no, any 2-cost card but that. So he saw my hand of really good cards, right? I still had like a Gorilla Attack Pod and I think a black one in my hand or something. And he's like, I think I'll get rid of the Forced Surrender. And at that point, that game was lost. I snuck it out. I got him to 24, and I had a turn where I had initiative, and I had just a wing leader left on the board, and he had 3 damage left, or 3 health left. 4 health left, and I top decked a shoot first instead of a surprise attack. If I had gotten a surprise attack, I could have snuck game 2, but he had like 30 units in ground, and I was out of outmaneuvers, so I died. And then game 3, we just finished, and it went a lot like game 1. I had a ton of space units. My opponent wasn't getting any answers. You're my only hope to like a 3PO or an R2 off their deck, and it felt really bad. But I think at the end of the game, we had like an A-Wing, a Red 3, a Falcon, and it was the Han deploy turn, so I could swing for like 13 or 14 that turn. So we snuck it 2-1, but I did not get off any of my forced surrenders, which felt really bad, but it was okay. My opponent was super fun to play against. I had a blast. That's what this game should be.
We just had an interesting conversation about forced surrender on the podcast a few minutes ago.
Oh, what did people say behind my back?
We were talking about sideboarding, obviously, like what our strategies are for sideboarding. And I asked if there's any card that you feel like, depending on the deck you're building, that you have to have into a certain matchup. And I said, force surrender to play. You side in against control decks because they're waiting to the late game and they're holding on to their bombs. And then you hit them with a force surrender, nuke their hand, and now they can't play their bombs because you just discarded them.
That's fair. Well, I main decked for surrender like a fool. Interesting. That's a pretty good choice. I like that card. That's a good side deck card, sideboard card.
So what we just got finished talking about sideboarding. So what is your sideboarding strategies?
So I go one of 2 ways. So I look at my deck and what I expect to see in the field. And let's just talk about like a triangle, right? Where control is really good against mid-range, and mid-range is really good against aggro, and aggro is really good against control. If I'm playing a deck that has like one thing I'm strong against and one thing that I'm weak against, I never put anything in my sideboard to make me stronger against the deck that I'm already strong against. I shouldn't need help with that. My deck should just do that. And then I've got 10 cards in my sideboard, so I put 4 cards in typically to help me in a mirror match. And then I put 6 cards in to sort of pull me up in the thing that I'm probably at a disadvantage against. So in this deck, I'm really bad against ground aggro. If they get too many ground units too fast, it just snowballs. And I've got a couple cheap ground units, but I bring shoot firsts, and I bring more of those assault ATRTs so that I can deal with more units faster, right? Han on turn 2 can play that 3/5 assault ATRT if I have an A-wing in space, and that almost takes care of anything your opponent's playing. So it can be really good against aggro. So that's like the deck I brought in from, or that's the part that I brought in from my side deck. But usually I do 6 cards for the thing that I'm weak against, 4 for the mirror, and then I make that my 10 cards. Occasionally, I'll do something beyond that. The other rule I have for sideboarding, and it might not be a rule that I follow forever, is typically my sideboards are 5 cards, 2 copies of each. I don't like taking a one of and putting it in my deck, because unless I'm playing like a control deck where I plan to draw my whole deck, I can never count on drawing the 1 card. I don't always do 3s, because sometimes that takes up too much room in the sideboard, but if I put 2 in there, like I have 2 sneak attack in this deck in my sideboard, I can sort of count on drawing it eventually, if I'm going to last till turn 5 or 6 or something like that. So I do copies of 2 in the sideboard. The only time I put like a singleton copy in the sideboard is if, like in my blue Chewy deck right now, I run 2 Vanquish, and I kind of need Vanquish to deal with Fet's Fire. So if I go up against a Boba and I say, okay, I'm going to need to deal with Fet's Fire Spray, I better put that 3rd copy of Vanquish in there. So if there's certain cards that like I only have 2 of in my deck and the one more of could be really beneficial, then I'll put that in my sideboard as well. Typically my strategy is forget that I have a sideboard until after the match and then think about what I would have sideboarded. But this time I actually put in my 2 shoot firsts, so that felt good.
Ben, do you have anything on the 5-2 sideboard array that Dan creates?
I also
Do you do 3 ofs or 2
I don't tend to like one ofs in my decks, generally speaking. I realize I just talked about the one of restock that I have to run because people hate being decked out. But yeah, I tend to agree with that. I'm not the hugest fan of one ofs, although in the particular deck that I'm running now, I do see the majority, if not my entire deck, in a lot of games. So it's not as bad. I like the philosophy of doing 5 two ofs rather than having like a one of sitting off there. Generally speaking, yeah, I think that's all solid. I agree.
Sometimes I'll do 2 3s and 2 2s, but typically I like to have 5 different options that I could swap in. Gives you more choices.
And then the only time I would really want to do a one of overall is like if I have a 2 of in the main deck,
Yeah.
have that one of to add that 3rd copy if I need it in a certain matchup. So, Dan, are you playing in any other webcam leagues other than the Saga League? Because Mr. Ben's a part of like 7 at the moment.
I'm in one other one, and I'm getting
Which one?
royally crushed.
Is it one that
we're
I'm
gonna
in too?
pretend it
I'm
doesn't
curious.
exist. Let's not worry about that. No. I think so. It's the Infinite Gaming one.
Oh, yeah, we must not be in the same group. Yeah, I am in that one.
We're not in the same group. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I've played 2 of my matches, and in both of them, I've like decided to go with one deck over another deck, and I think I played Chewy in both, and in both I ended up going against like the counter to my deck, which was really brutal. So the first one, I just couldn't stick a single unit to the board, and just failed miserably for 2 games. The second one was against Yellow Sabine that had a lot of Saboteur. And every game came down to 2 points of damage, which was super fun. But I learned that I really dislike Saboteur as a shield Chewy deck. My opponent played it really smart too, where they didn't use Saboteur to like get rid of my shields, because they knew that if I was going to attack into their saboteurs, I was going to be wasting actions. So they just kept bypassing and hitting base, and it was just too fast. I think in one game I played 3 copies of Vigilance, and I had side decked in 2 copies of Repair, and I healed all of that, all 21, and Sabine still burnt through 51 hit points. And I had her down to 1. It felt good, but it wasn't
It's
enough.
ridiculous. That's so much health.
It was insane.
Yeah. We also had already. We were kind of at the end.
I figured.
We had gone over the set 2 cards.
Mm.
Do you have anything from set 2 that you'd like to highlight that you like, don't like, new mechanics?
My one thing that I'll say, I'm very happy that we're getting Imperial support. And I hope we get Rebel support the same way. I would really be sad if we have all these cool, like, Rebel and Imperial archetypes in the first set. All these, a Rebel gets +2, a Rebel gets experience, and then we didn't get anything to go along with it. So the fact that we got Moff Gideon and the Death Trooper that has the Imperial trait makes me very happy, because I don't want them to just immediately abandon the old traits and make us wait 3 sets before we get support for it. That always feels bad. So super excited for it. Can't wait. I mean, I have to wait, but I don't want to wait. Also, our store is trying to figure out what playmat they're going to make for our. We have like a monthly tournament, so you play in weekly tournaments to get points, and the top 8 get to play in like a showdown at the end of every month, and they make a playmat for like a year cycle. So there'll be 12 copies of this playmat, and they just put 3 up to vote for, and one is this like Boba Fett helmet with the zones on it. One is just like hyperspace lines, and the other one is a Grogu give it a thumbs up, and I'm definitely voting for that one. I will play the sweatiest deck ever for a 4-fingered Grogu mat. So if I win it, we'll show it on camera.
When you win it.
When I win it, in one of those 12 months, it'll happen. Or I pay someone for the mat when I lose it.
There you go.
It's still a win.
All right. Well, it's kind of weird to have gone through
Yes.
the majority of the show and then, like, you jump
Yeah,
in. I almost
sorry.
feel like we need to talk about more stuff. You know what I mean?
Well, what else do you want to talk about? You got any other exciting stories?
No, I think that that draw I put myself
Yeah.
into with that dumb Dooku play was like the most exciting thing that happened to me on the playmats recently. I
That's fair.
I've
just played way too much Chewy, and that's what I've done.
My most exciting stuff is we posted to YouTube now. So my Chewy games. So
Did you play your week 5 yet?
no, that's gonna be Sunday night. I'm playing
Oh, that's right. Okay, we'll
Playing-
hear about that next time.
Kevin for Molon.
I'm excited for it.
I did wanna shout out Jay Sweeney from our Discord. Have you guys paired
I
with
played
him at
him
all
this week.
or played against him? He was at the 1K at the Bandage Zone. He brought his kid, his son. I think he's 10 years old. Was there playing Thrawn. Was the only Thrawn player at the event. And it was real cool seeing like people that won, like, because they were doing like raffle prizes. Like people were giving the kids like raffle prizes and extra cards and stuff they didn't need. Like I gave him a deck box.
Nice.
I wanted a deck box. He didn't have a deck box. All his stuff was in the pre-release box. So like I gave him the deck box I won because I have deck boxes, right? So it was cool seeing the community support, you know, a younger player, getting him excited about the game and helping him out with his deck. And it was also I also wanted to shout
Sure.
him out because he
That's
came
always
up and
nice.
talked about the show and the webcam league and everything with me. So that was cool. So
After our match
Before I
this week,
forgot.
he had some questions for me about my Thrawn deck, and I ended up sending him my list. Hey, here's what I'm thinking. Yeah, take all my ideas and help your kid make a cool deck. That's awesome. I think that's very cool.
yeah,
Well, next time I'll be on time. I won't take forever playing this Han deck that I don't know what it does.
it's fine.
Well, I mean, and
What
you
should
were
I
not
play
alone.
on Sunday?
I potentially was going to have to play at this exact time slot too, but I was able to fit it in during the workday yesterday. What are your options that you're thinking about for Sunday, Banana?
Whatever you give me a leader and aspect combination, and I'll play it Sunday.
Jin Vigilance with Electro Staff. Don't do that. but it'd be
Uh,
cool.
not just.
Someday
Vigilance.
it'll work.
I'm gonna have some sort of I'm gonna have some sort of veto power here, but it has to be something I'm interested in. But uh,
I think Cassian,
yeah,
Fair,
my
fair.
my buddy
uh,
Joe's been putting some work into Cassian, and I mean he's not the same kind of like shoot your face off aggro that Sabine is, but I think that deck might have legs, like aggro that can refill itself. There's something there.
mono aggro Cassian.
Sure. Go
That
for
could
it.
be fun. I keep trying to build Cassian, and then I just build Sabine or Han instead. So don't try
Yeah,
yellow-red Caspian,
yeah,
because you'll
I
just
have.
turn your deck into a Han or Sabine
Yep,
deck.
100%.
Well, and he does
Uh,
fall victim to that a little bit because he basically
100% I
wants to
agree.
do the exact same thing that Sabine wants to do, and she's just sort of like a little bit better at that thing.
That's the main problem. Yep.
Yeah, yep. All so they had the art stream yesterday, and they showed artwork for a bunch of things. Is there any that got you excited to see that was potentially coming as a leader or character?
Very excited for Bad Batch. That may have been like the Twitter one that they put out today, but Bad Batch. I'm excited for clones. More clones. I don't want just Wolf. He's lonely. He needs his friends.
I was excited to see my son Forlom in the artwork. If you see like my Discord status is like father of Forlom, and it's been that way since like because I played this Forlom deck really well in Star Wars Destiny towards the end of its life. So um, there's a Forlom Grievous deck. But
I thought you were telling me you're like a droid builder now or
yeah,
something.
hey, yeah. Babu Frick learned a lot from me. But yeah, I'm excited for more bounty hunters. Zuckus, Forlom, the Cad Bane art looked pretty cool. So seeing my current favorite character in Star Wars Destiny art, or Star Wars Unlimited art was pretty cool.
I am actively watching, getting caught up with Bad Batch right now. Like when I'm doing dishes, like that's my background noise show at the moment. So when I saw the Bad Batch announcement today, I was like, yes, this is exactly what I want to see. Probably won't get me off Thrawn though.
That's something will. We'll see what it is.
Max Rebo. When we get the Max Rebo leader, that's when I'll change.
When we get the
I
when we get the Jizz deck, that's when you're gonna switch to
Yeah,
Max
the
Rebo when
Jar
you're
Jar
playing.
Binks leader. That'll they'll have to create a new aspect, the aspect of buffoonery. Okay, okay. Before this gets any sillier, does anybody have any parting thoughts before we get
Yeah,
out of here?
yeah. Don't get cocky is underrated and underplayed. If you're playing yellow, don't get cocky is good removal.
don't tell
All
them our
right,
secret tech.
we'll
Come
leave it
on, man.
Just
there.
throwing it out there.
All right, until next time, we'll see you in the arenas.